You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
It's my pleasure to be here today with Brendan Kane, who wears a couple of hats as well. He's authored a couple of books. The one that caught my attention is the 1 Million Followers book, 1 Million Followers, How I Built a Massive Social Following in 30 Days. And I'm sure there are a lot of folks who'd like to learn how to do that. Obviously, they should buy the book, but we'll touch on that. But Brendan, why don't you also tell us what your sort of day job does, the Hook team?
Yeah, so we have a company called Hook Point, and really we specialize in helping people stand out at the highest levels. So as most people know, we live in a very noisy world. Some people may not realize how noisy it is, because I can remember when I first started in this space in 2005, I'm going to date myself. I can remember the exact time when MySpace released a press release saying that they reached 1 million people on their platform. And if you fast forward to today, there's over 4 billion people on social media pushing 200 billion messages into the world. So our core specialty is rising above that noise and helping people stand out at the highest levels, whether it's B2C, B2B, any type of business or industry we work with.
Great. Well, dating myself, I got started in digital in 94 and Did It in 96. So I've been doing this for over 26 years, but 26 years under Did It, which has gone through a bunch of transformations. But I will agree with you that breaking through the clutter has always been a primary objective of nearly every marketer ever since, even before I was doing digital, even in the traditional realm, right? Breaking through the clutter is key. So obviously part of breaking through the clutter is having the reach to reach as many followers as possible. And your book talks a lot about that. But even, against any fixed number of followers or folks that are in your audience, breaking through is more than just the reach. It's also the messaging. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about how getting the messaging right makes a difference between success or failure once you've got your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we have really what's called a hook point formula that we use for delivering messages at scale and with substance. So there's 3 core pillars to that hook point formula. The first is grabbing attention. So how do you grab attention in those first few seconds? Because if you don't master that, then you get lost in the noise. You get lost in the sea of those 200 billion messages sent out every day. But it's not just about grabbing attention. It's about how do we hold that attention for as long as possible, because attention without any substance doesn't really do anything for your brand. So we're not talking about clickbait. We're not talking about going viral for the sake of going viral. There has to be substance to it. And then the third is monetizing that attention. How does that attention translate to your overall business objectives and goals? Because we do see a lot of people that may be able to successfully grab and hold attention, but it's not really correlating to their brand. It's not really correlating to their products or services. And thus, it just really doesn't drive the overarching business for them. So it kind of falls flat. So all 3 of those key core pillars need to play together to really be able to successfully scale your marketing efforts. You have to grab that attention, hold that attention, and then monetize that attention. And within each of those 3 core pillars, we have specific aspects of our expertise and experience that plays into them. So when we talk about grabbing attention, we have a viral content engineering process that we've developed that's backed by over 60 billion views and over 100 million followers for all the projects we've worked on. When we talk about holding attention, we have a communication algorithm that really dives deep into subconscious communication, how we contextualize our storytelling, how we contextualize our message. So it really speaks to each different way that people perceive the world. And then from the monetizing, we're deeply rooted in kind of business innovation, business ideation, and business goals. Because one of the things, and I know from your experience, you probably see this as well, some people in marketing experts or marketing agencies, they just focus on the creative or kind of the messaging, and they don't look at the holistic picture of how it actually fits into driving the business.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like you've managed to really coalesce a lot of important elements together into your process and systematize it in such a way that your clients can use it. One subject area that was in your Million Followers book that I thought was pretty fascinating was the idea of strategic alliances. And obviously within the influencer and social media context, those take a bunch of different forms, right? They could be two brands working together. It could be a brand and a publisher, or it could be a brand and an influencer. So I'd love you to, delve into the, best practices that you guys find when you're working with a brand that maybe doesn't have a lot of its own reach and they need to figure out how to piggyback on somebody else's reach.
Yeah, strategic alliances and partnerships are extremely valuable. And to just give kind of an analogy for people is you take YouTube, for example. So YouTube was acquired for, I think, $1.7 billion in like 24 to 36 months. And you ask, well, how did they grow so quick? Well, if you think back to the MySpace days, MySpace didn't have an embeddable video player. So YouTube created one of the first embeddable video players, and then people started embedding videos on their MySpace profile. They didn't have a partnership with MySpace, but then each time somebody saw a YouTube player, everybody else said, I want a YouTube player for mine. And they basically siphoned off all of MySpace's traffic. And at one point, MySpace cut the embed code and there was an uprising, and then they reinstated it. So that's kind of like a high level example of it. Another example, you referenced influencers. So I go back to the earliest stages of influencers. I did the first ever influencer campaign on YouTube in like 2006, 2007 for a movie with Jason Statham. And at the time they weren't called influencers,
right.
But I was working for like a mid-tier studio. So we didn't have the huge marketing budgets of the major studios. So I said, well, there are these people on YouTube, they're acquiring these major audiences. I'm just going to reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to interview a movie star? And I sent out like 100 messages and like 6 responded. But those 6 represented millions and millions of free views. And because influencer marketing wasn't really around, I got that reach for free. Another analogy to it is I lived in LA for 15 years. And when influencers really started to take off, what happened is they started moving in the same complexes with each other. So there was a complex called 1600 Vine, and like Amanda Cerny, King Bach, and others moved into that building, and they would cross collaborate. They would create content with each other and share each other's audiences. So I'm a firm believer in, especially if you're starting out, go where the traffic is. Don't start it from scratch.
Cool. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's always easier to piggyback on somebody else's reach than to try to build your own organically. Although you can reach a tipping point where all of a sudden, if your content is great, it's sort of you're building your own audience. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, they all have sort of a video format, but what works in one does not necessarily work in the other. So as your team is sort of taking your systemized process and then thinking about reutilizing content or customizing content for the different platforms, how do you think that through when you're working with a client?
Yeah, so typically we say, let's focus on one platform and get really good at it. It doesn't mean that you can't repurpose it for other platforms, but there's so much nuance that goes into virality. So first, looking at each platform, the consumption behavior is different. Even if you look at the difference between Instagram Reels and TikTok, there's a very different consumption behavior. So what works on TikTok may not work on Reels and vice versa. So really the first stage of working with clients is we identify, again, what are their business goals and objectives? What are the resources they have available in terms of creating content? What are their communication strengths and weaknesses? And then we'll identify the platform. And then our viral content engineering process is deeply rooted in research. And this is kind of the amazing thing when it comes to creativity. If we think about science in general, when we're creating a vitamin supplement or a cure, we leverage centuries of trial and error and data to inform our advancements. And we almost have to, because there's all these restrictions and approvals and things like that. But when it comes to creativity, there's billions and billions of data points available to us for absolutely free. And we don't use those data points. We typically, in the creative process, we start with brand guidelines, or we just jump to the ideation phase. So what we do when we're working with clients is we start with research. And our research process, do we look at the competitors? Yes. But because 99% of brands are really struggling and failing with social media, the competitors will typically tell you what not to do, which is important, don't get me wrong, because we look at performance drivers in our research when we look for low performance drivers and high performance drivers. So then we extend that research to other content creators that may have nothing to do with the subject matter that we're tackling. And we study the storytelling mechanisms that they're using. So we'll look at the first 3 seconds. We'll look at the cadence. We'll look at the tonality, the pacing. We'll look at the number of edits. We'll look at the storytelling formats that they leverage so that we can identify those high performance drivers. And then once we have the hypotheses of what's driving performance and also what's driving down performance, then we can help start creating ideas. But without that research, you're kind of just playing on luck. And a lot of people will say going viral is luck. It's not, it's engineered. And we've proven it time and time again. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple. And listen, it takes time to get good at research. You know, we've been doing research for 7 years and we understand the minutia of that. And it's kind of the reason we're launching a new product in a few weeks where we do the research for people, because you have to really look at those nuanced details. And just to kind of hit home the point further, so I have a friend that we've been kind of advising on the business side, and he's about 20 million followers on TikTok. So we analyzed his most viewed video, which was 90 million views. And then we analyzed an average video that was about 5 million views. And when we looked at the retention graph, meaning the average length of time people spent with that video, the 90 million view video had a retention of 27 seconds. And the 5 million view had a retention of 21 seconds. So we're talking about a 6-second differential represented 85 million views in performance. That's the level of granularity of the world that we live in and how you have to design your content.
Well, it's good that you're applying science to it, because a lot of folks just are spitballing it as they go. One area that a lot of marketers are concerned about when it comes to influencers or celebrities, or they used to spokespeople, even ones that they create from scratch, like Jared for Subway, didn't work out particularly well, or Flo from Progressive, which has worked out pretty well in general. They worry about authenticity, right? Particularly when they're going to start collaborating or partnering with influencers or celebrities. So do you guys have a particular process that you recommend marketers follow to assure that there's authenticity in the messaging?
Yeah, we do. I mean, the first thing that I'll say is whenever we work with somebody, we never change who somebody is. We don't change their core message. We show how that message is contextualized. So that's the big thing, is you do not have to change the core fundamentals of how you want to represent yourself, but the delivery mechanism for that, the way you're telling those stories, does change. Do you mind if I just share my screen for a second? Will
Sure.
people be able to see it?
Turn that on. Hang on. I'll have to give you control. There you go.
Because I think it'll just be kind of valuable to
Sure.
kind of show the visuals. So as I mentioned, we have a communication algorithm for that, exactly what you're talking about, is how do we deliver our message that can connect with our core target audience in the most powerful way. So typically what we find is most brands are connecting with less than 30% of their core target. And when I say connecting, I mean really connecting with the message. So what we did is, and this has based on a communication framework that's been around since the 1970s. It's backed by over 1.5 million assessments done around the world. And what it does is it breaks down communication into this mathematical formula. And I'll walk, it may seem overwhelming, but I promise I'll walk through each of these. But basically, it breaks down how people perceive the world. And how people perceive the world dictates whether they connect with a brand, whether they connect with a piece of content. So the largest subset of the population is feeling based. So they're connecting with a message, they're connecting with a product or service based upon how it makes them feel. 25%, the second largest, is fact based. So they're connecting based upon, does it make sense? Is the data there? Who, what, when, where, why? That's what they want to know. The third largest, 20%, is fun based. They want to know that this is going to be an awesome experience, that it's going to be exciting, it's going to be fun, and really engage that part. 10% is value based. So when you talk about authenticity, these people care about authenticity. They care about, is this brand committed to me? Can I trust them? Another 10% is imagination based. So they reflect on the world. The best analogy I can give you is Albert Einstein. How did Albert Einstein come up with all of his genius ideas? He would stare off in the window for hours and then just reflecting on the world. And then 5% is action based. They just want the best. They want to move fast. They want the bottom line. The best analogy for this is if you ever see Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, what is he doing? He's running the entire movie. He's not thinking. He's not having fun. It's not about values and opinions. He's just going. And that's how he is in real life. That's why you see him actually hanging off the side of airplanes to do stunts, because incidents is one of their motivational factors. So this really takes it home. So imagine we have this scenario. We have our marketing director and we have our customer. And on paper, they look the same. They're both female, same age, high income earners, shop at the same place, both married with children and university educated. However, their communication styles can be completely different. So the base here for the marketing director is action, for the base here for the customer is feeling based. So this is the problem that a lot of times we're running into marketing. It's not the message, it's not the product or the service. It's that this marketing director is going to go from an action base and go, speak really fast, say this is the best, you got to move now, do this now. And the customer just wants to know, well, how is this going to make me feel? How is this going to make me connect with it? So that's really the core problem that we see here. And with this, we look at everything from language to facial expressions, body tones, the exact words, things of that nature. Because the idea is, how do we make the marketing communication look like this, unbalanced to balanced? Now, I can give you an example. So I was working with Keller Williams, one of the largest real estate companies in the world. And we did our research process. And in that research, we could see people are selling homes in the exact same way. You always see this. It's 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms on an acre of land. So what is that? That's fact-based. It's only 25% of the population. So how would I sell a house then? So I may start with the facts. It's 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms on an acre of land. But then I would say, do you see this fireplace over there? Imagine how good it's going to feel when you're sitting around that fireplace on Christmas Eve, opening presents with your closest family members. By the way, did you check out the pool in the backyard? You are going to have the funnest and craziest parties that your friends are all going to be jealous. You're going to have the best house on the block. And I firmly believe that this is the best house for you and your family based upon the school district. So what did I do there? I started with the facts and logic. Then I layered in the imagine this, but then I went straight into the feelings of how it's going to feel being around this fireplace, connecting with your family on Christmas Eve. And then I got into the fun and the action by saying, you're going to have the craziest and funnest parties and your neighbors are going to be jealous. And then it ended with the values. I believe that this is the right house for you based upon this school district. So it doesn't take a lot. And I'm not changing the content of the house, but I'm changing the way that the house is contextualized.
That's some great stuff there. One of the evolutions I've noticed over the years, because I started in regular mainstream Madison Avenue agencies like J. Walter Thompson and McCann Erickson, and then went digital. And early in digital, obviously, we didn't have the same flexibility that we have now. But one of the things that's definitely changed, and not every brand has been able to go through this change, is to move from a command and control messaging environment to empowering, in particular, influencers now to sort of be themselves, right? And recontextualize the marketing message into their own framework, because the more scripted it is, the less authentic it seems, right? Whereas when you really empower a celebrity or an influencer to sort of take that core message, but then communicate it in their own way, subject to perhaps your systemized method, right? That's going to come off way better than this command and control mentality. So when a brand comes to you and is still in this command and control mentality, and they think everything's got to be heavily scripted, what's your trick to get them to realize that they have to empower the creatives at the edge, right, to really take it and run with it?
Yeah. So if we, and I think that there's two angles to that. First is with the influencers is understand that hopefully you understand that you're engaging the influencer because you believe it speaks to your core audience and connects with your core audience through their way of delivering content. And I see the problem that you pointed out all the time is we have to rewrite creative briefs
exactly
for companies, because if you're just telling them you need to do this, say then, and all of that, most of these influencers just grew through their authentic connection with their content. And the more that you police that, the more that you restrict that, sure, you'll get the message across in the exact way that you want. But typically what's going to happen is your performance is going to be driven down. So let's just say the average video from the influencer is 100,000 views. The more that you restrict that, it's going to push it down to 20,000 or 10,000. So the first part is choosing influencers that you trust, looking at their content and knowing that they're not going to go unhinged with that. The second thing is, if we take it just to marketing in general, that's why we always start with research, because if you start with brand guidelines to inform the ideas and the content that you create, you're minimizing the impact on data. And at the end of the day, we really need to understand what drives performance. We need to be able to produce that performance, and then we can figure out how to layer brand into it. Now, again, it's not about completely changing who you are and how you represent your brand, but it is changing the way that you're delivering that content. Because, I've worked with multi-billion-dollar corporations, and they have a 100-person marketing team, and their average post is getting 10 likes. So it's like, are you just going to keep doing that over and over again just because it follows your brand guidelines? Or do you really want to break through that performance? Because you can always layer in brand later, but if you start with brand, like nobody ever logs onto social media that says, I want to engage with some great branded content. They want to be entertained. They want to be engaged. They want to fill a void in their life. They want to feel connected to something. So that's the first place. And I'm going to say it's a challenge. I'm not saying that we are successful every time in convincing the brands to do that. But if you want to have performance, if you want to successfully get your message to the masses, especially organically, you have to fundamentally change the creative process that you follow.
That's great advice. One other thing we've noticed, and this is true for paid media, earned media, and of course influencer, which is sort of a mix of both, is that different segments of the population respond differently. And they could be obviously because they're in those different buckets that you described earlier in your pie chart. But whether it's personas or demographics or psychographics, finding one message that meets everybody's needs is harder, but you can sometimes really be quite successful in identifying a fairly large segment of your target customer base and tuning messages that really resonate with those people. How have you addressed that when a particular sort of mass market like real estate, right? There's a lot of different kinds of buyers and there's a lot of different kinds of sellers, and crafting the perfect message for all of them may work less well than actually picking a particular persona and crafting a message that really hits that one.
Yeah, so the way that I look at it again is how I broke it down is you don't have to go overboard with fun, overboard with feelings, overboard with thoughts or any one of those, but you just need to layer it in. Like when I did the real estate example, is I said a few words to contextualize it. So that's the way that I look at it is how do we use language, use tonality, use body gestures, facial expressions to hit that, because it doesn't matter if you have an exact persona that is females 35 to 50 years old that live in this geolocation, because even within that persona, there's going to be diversity of how they perceive the world. So that's one thing. And I also want to delineate the difference between paid and organic, because there is a difference. Like what you're talking about can still work for paid. It is challenging if you're just delivering a specific message to, or designing a specific message for a specific audience and not layering in the different ways that people are perceiving the world. But I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't work. It can still work. But when it comes to organic performance, you have to understand how the algorithms work. And there's a lot of misinformation and demonization of the algorithms. At the end of one of the biggest myths is the algorithms are there for pay for play. So I have to pay for reach. It's simply not true, because if that was the case, nobody would ever go viral. The purpose of the algorithms is to serve the underlying business goals of these social platforms. And the business goal is retention. The longer people spend on these platforms, the more ads they can serve, the more revenue they make. Now, when we go back to talking about 200 billion messages sent across social media every day, there is so much content for the algorithms to choose from. So they are going to look for content that holds attention for as long as possible with the widest audience possible. So when you're creating an organic strategy, you have to make people care that don't know about you or may not even care about your subject matter. Because if you go, I'm going to create a specific message for a specific audience, maybe let's just say for the sake of it, you have 10,000 followers. What the algorithms are going to do is they're going to push it to 500 of those 10,000. They're going to measure the retention of that. And if the retention is good, they'll push it to another 1,000. And if, again, the retention is good, they'll go to 5,000, 10,000, and then beyond your audience. But if they see it to those 500 people and the retention's not there, they kill the reach rate right there. In addition, the algorithms may give you a test and say, okay, these people have 10,000 followers, but let's test it with some audiences beyond that. The minute they see that it's not performing outside of that audience, they kill performance. So your goal as a content creator is how can you make the widest audience possible care about your content? So I'll give you an example, because some people say, well, I just need to sell my product to a specific core target. There's a real estate agent, a luxury real estate agent named Ryan Serhant. He sells properties that are between $10 and $100 million in New York, in Manhattan. He has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and his videos go viral. Now, why? Because if you look at his most viewed videos, let me take you on a tour of a $7 million closet. Let me take you on a tour of a $250 million ranch. Now, anybody wants to see that content. So when the algorithms push it out to a wide audience, they see people like it. They're watching it for a long period of time. So it's playing to what the algorithms want, but he knows even if it's less than 1%, if I get 1 million views on this video, and less than 1% is my core target, I'm still hitting a huge subset of my population, of my core audience. And he has said that he sold 10, 20, $30 million properties off of a YouTube video. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. And there's other examples of this. One of the things is people say, oh, well, my subject matters can't go viral. It's not interesting enough. I can point to so many examples. There's a YouTube account called Clear Tax Value. it's all about taxes. And he has over 1 million subscribers and averages 300,000 to 400,000 views a video. But what he did that was so brilliant is during COVID, he started creating videos around the stimulus checks that brought in this wide audience. There's another influencer called Graham Stephan that teaches finance to millennials. And finance isn't a sexy subject matter, but he makes it interesting. Like his most viewed video, I think has 7 million views, is how I bought a Tesla for $78. So he breaks down how he did that, but then he's teaching the fundamentals of finance and bringing in this wide audience that can now follow his account.
Cool. So bringing it to something that's pretty newsworthy now, the way I think of the social media platforms is they fall into two general buckets. So the ones that like to keep the users right there in the platform where they don't want them to leave, and certainly TikTok would be the best example because people rarely click out of TikTok or stop going through TikToks. Instagram to a great extent similar, whereas you think about Facebook and Twitter, right? They're also a, hey, look over there kind of platform. You can click out of those and go visit somewhere else where the rest of the content sits. And to some extent, YouTube is in the middle. But now we've got Elon Musk, hypothetically at least, as of today, about to take over Twitter, right? Which has been struggling in a variety of ways. So if you were advising him to remake Twitter to take advantage of the consumer behaviors that it's not really fully taking advantage of, what would your advice be to Elon Musk with Twitter's algo and or format?
I would lean heavily into video. I know they have video, and this is a core fundamental of what makes Twitter great. It's short text. But if you look at the audience size of Twitter compared to TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, it's really not even comparable. Like it's such a small fish compared to the others. And again, when we look at how these platforms make money, it's through retention. Now, I know Elon is not doing it for money, but if you want to talk about user growth, it's, and we could, talk about it if you want, but I'm not going to dive into it right now, is the underlying reason that these platforms are successful is because they are tying subconscious desires and subconscious triggers to result into that platform. And the more you result to that platform, the more you spend time on that platform, the more likely you're to choose that platform over another. So I don't have the data, but I would suspect that the retention or the average duration on a YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram is far larger than Twitter. And that makes sense because Twitter is the short form text content. Obviously, you can read longer form content on it, but that's kind of how I would advise it. Now, they did kind of reproduce Clubhouse's feature in there, which I think was a smart move. But if you're really trying to take the platform to the next level, that's how I would focus.
Great. And finally, any tips for marketers or things that you think are going to work particularly well over the next year or so with regards to going viral or effective marketing on social?
Yeah, it just goes back to really understanding the core fundamental goal of the algorithms, because for better or for worse, the algorithms control your ability for reach and distribution. And it's even with paid acquisition too. You see the auctions fluctuating your costs based upon that retention of ads too, because yes, they'll serve your ad in the feed, but their feed is their holy grail. They don't want to keep serving bad ads that people don't engage with. So it's really mastering that art of grabbing that attention and holding that attention. And it's really becoming a student of the game and not starting with brand guidelines, but starting with identifying those key performance drivers, both high and low, to make informed decisions of how we're going to effectively create the best content.
Great. Well, what's the best way for folks to reach you? Which platform would you hang out on most? Is it LinkedIn, or should they just visit one of your domains?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great platform. Instagram, I do respond to DMs on there. If people want, I know I walked through a few slides. You can get access to the full deck if you go to hookpoint.com for free. You can watch a video on there and also schedule a call with our team as well.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Lots of great tips in there for people to digest.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that tuned in for this.
Sounds good.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.